Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is planning a funeral. They're choosing flowers, picking out clothes, deciding whether to bury or cremate, and every single one of those decisions comes from a set of beliefs about what death means. Beliefs so deeply embedded you've probably never questioned them. But here's what nobody tells you. Those beliefs aren't modern. They aren't religious. They are at least 130,000 years old. And when you look at what your ancestors actually did when someone died, you don't find primitive people disposing of a body. You find something that looks disturbingly like what we still do today, and in some cases something far stranger. Let's start with the oldest confirmed burial of a modern human ever found. Qafzeh Cave, Israel, 130,000 years ago. Archaeologists excavating the site found the skeleton of a child, and across that child's arms, deliberately placed, was the full skull and antlers of a fallow deer. Someone carried those antlers into a cave and arranged them on a dead child over 100,000 years before the pyramids existed. That is not disposal, that is ceremony. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. That wasn't even close to the first time a hominin had done something like this. In 2013, inside an almost inaccessible cave system in South Africa called Rising Star, researchers found the bones of at least 15 individuals of a species called Homo naledi. To reach them, someone had to squeeze through an 18-centimeter crack and descend nearly 12 meters into darkness. Homo naledi had a brain less than half of the size of yours, and yet in 2023, Lee Berger's team at the University of the Witwatersrand published evidence suggesting those bodies had been deliberately carried in and that marks on the cave walls may have been intentionally engraved. If confirmed, that means a species we once considered too primitive for symbolic thought was conducting something resembling burial ritual 335,000 years ago. The scientific community is still arguing about it, but the bodies are real and the cave entrance is real, and someone brought them there. Now, we also know Neanderthals buried their dead. For a long time, this was controversial. Then, in the 1950s, a site called Sungir Cave in what is now Iraq yielded the skeleton of a Neanderthal surrounded by dense clusters of flower pollen. Researcher Ralph Selecki argued they had been buried with flowers, that Neanderthals grieved, that they had a concept of the soul. That interpretation has since been challenged. A burrowing rodent may have deposited the pollen, but the burial itself, the deliberate placement of the body, is now broadly accepted. They were putting their dead in the ground on purpose 60,000 years ago. But none of this, not the antlers, not the cave, not the Neanderthal grave, prepares you for what archaeologists found in Russia. Sungir, 34,000 years ago. Two children buried head to head, their skulls touching. Covering their bodies, more than 10,000 individually drilled mammoth ivory beads, carved ivory, fox teeth, a straightened mammoth tusk nearly 2.5 meters long. Researchers estimate that producing those 10,000 beads alone would have taken 10,000 hours of labor. These were not powerful adults. They were children, and their community spent the equivalent of years of work to send them out of this world. That raises a question that has no clean answer. Why? Why would people living on the edge of survival, hunting megafauna, enduring ice age winters, fighting for every calorie, spend that kind of time and resource on the dead? The best answer archaeology can offer is this: they weren't doing it for the dead, they were doing it for themselves. The act of burial, of ceremony, of marking the moment when someone leaves, that is not about the body in the ground. It is about the people still standing around it. It is about the unbearable fact of loss and the human need to respond to it with something that says, this person mattered. That impulse, to mark death with ritual, to refuse to let it pass in silence, is not a product of civilization. It is not something religion invented. It is at least 130,000 years old, possibly much older. And the next time you stand at a graveside, know this: the thing you're feeling and the thing you're doing about it is the most ancient behavior we have.